Hello, welcome to the Three Orcs channel. This is David, and this is going to be a video on using Dungeon Crawl Classics. Now, we have a lot of Dungeon Masters running the Temple of Elemental Evil campaign in the Verbobonc campaign guide 576 common year that I produce, that I have available on World Anvil for free as fan content for anybody running the campaign as a sandbox campaign. We're not running the Temple of Elemental Evil in year 576 common year as intended by Gygax, the original module, but we're running this as a campaign, not just from the pages. Traditionally, in the past, people used to run, like myself in the 80s, we would run the module from the pages where they go to T1, they go to Hommlet, they clear out the moat house, and they follow up with clues, sending them to Nulb. And Nulb only had 4 locations, which is basically a springboard place to stay over between visiting the temple ruins and doing a dungeon crawl. And basically, a lot of players get bored halfway through the dungeon crawl, and one of my groups never even made it to the bottom because they got tired of room after room of killing monsters and looting the place. Even though that is the kind of game we kind of played back in the 80s, you know, with the G's and the D's and the A's and the B's and the C's, all those modules. But we ran Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, by Gary Gygax. And he wrote this original module for AD&D. Well, there's a lot of Dungeon Masters on the Three Orcs Discord channel and the Patreon that's running this campaign. And they're using my websites, my maps, my artwork, all the things I offer for this campaign in their campaign. They're all using different rule sets. A lot of them are running AD&D, of course. Some are running basic D&D or old school essentials, and then some are running Pathfinder, and some are even running, believe it or not, 5th edition. And when I create a module for the Dungeon Masters Guild for Greyhawk, it's required that the modules be in 5th edition. And the way I do that is I make sure all the stat blocks are in 5th edition. But you can still use the module, the lore, the dialogue, the flavor text, the descriptions, the narration, the maps, the artwork, no matter what rule set you're using. I know Dungeon Crawl Classics have a definite play style, and I know those kind of people that run this, it's very popular at conventions back east, and I got a sense why. And I've run it before. But the play style for traditional dungeon crawling, I think that's what this rule system's geared for. And a lot of us that like to role play, we run campaigns, and we like old school rules where the dungeon master can run the game with rulings rather than rules, no codified rules. Other dungeon masters do, but a lot of them run their campaigns online on BTT, and that's a battle map, and it kind of turns into a board game. But that's besides the fact. But when I run this campaign, I run it at the table in person with like 3 or 4 different groups. And we role play a lot of this stuff. And I use Castles and Crusades and AD&D. I've also run old school essentials a few times with it. And we ran Dungeon Crawl Classics at the school system that we're running D&D for. Well, a couple of my DMs on the Three Orcs Discord channel, they do run the Temple of Elemental Evil campaign with Crawl Classics. And he wanted me to do a review on it to see what you can do with this rule system running this kind of campaign. And that's what he's doing. I've already made videos reviewing Castles and Crusades, Shadow Dark, and Old School Essentials. Well, I figured Dungeon Crawl Classics should be next since we have Dungeon Masters running it for the Greyhawk campaign. So I'm going to go ahead and do a quick look at the rule map. I'm somewhat qualified to make this loose review in regards to running it with a campaign because I've run it before in a tournament, and I've been playing D&D for over 45 years, and I used to work with TSR. And so I've made a lot of videos about this subject, and I've been DMing for a very long time, and I have a certain stance of the different kind of D&D games. I'm not cut and dry where you think that D&D has to be one certain way. It all depends on the campaign, what kind of campaign you're running at the table. I think all the different rule sets have their own use case, depending on what you're running. And in my time running Castles or Crusades for the school system, we decided we were running old school essentials for the kids, teaching them how to play traditional Dungeons and Dragons. And then one day, one of the Dungeon Masters came in and said, I want to run a tournament on one particular week towards the end of the semester. And it's one of those typical Dungeon Crawl Classic tournaments that you can download off their website and run it. We had different levels, and as a Dungeon Master assigned to each area. I was assigned to one of them, and the players would have to survive that. And each player had like 4 characters. And so I ran that. I studied the rules and I ran it. And it was fun for that tournament. Yes, it was. And so what I want to do here is I want to compare this rule system, how it would work with running a campaign like the Temple of Elemental Evil. So let's go ahead and take a look at the rule set real quick. Now, this is so I did buy the actual book and the screen here. I have the screen in front of me on the camera, and it's a typical 3-page spread of rules and awesome artwork on the other side. And I see that a lot of the stuff I do recognize from traditional Dungeons and Dragons with a lot more charts. But let's go ahead and take a look at the rules on screen here. And I know they have a definite vibe, a definite art style, which I approve. That's one of the reasons why I like Dolmenwood. It's based on Old School Essentials. Old School Essentials does have their own vibe, their own art style, a lot of line art, like reminiscent of the old first D&D. And I like that kind of artwork a lot. I think it sets a great tone for the game. And Dungeon Crawl Classics is not short on that either. They do a wonderful job with their artwork setting the tone of the game. And I know Dolmenwood does the same thing with their campaign material, which is a different kind of art style. So there's been a lot of video reviews on this rule set over the years, and I'm not going to make another one like that. What I want to do is I want to look this over and discuss compatibility and how you would leverage this rule system with running the Temple of Elemental Evil campaign in Greyhawk. And I'm going to a little bit ad-lib it here. Now, I do have a Dungeon Master that's running this currently for Greyhawk, and he made me a bullet point list of things to look at, to compare and see how this would work. So let's go ahead and get past all this artwork here and start at the very beginning at the table of contents. This is what he sent me. He sent me an overview of what he thinks of the rule system and the characters, the classes, the skills, the equipment, combat, spell duels, magic, patrons, and monsters. Little comments here. And let's start with the overview of what he mentioned. Then we'll go ahead and look at the manual real quick and see how that works out. So he starts off stating that DCC was created in 2012 on the 3rd edition of the OGL by Joseph Goodman and Goodman Games, recreating the feel of gritty sword and sorcery and Appendix N. Appendix N is the back of the Dungeon Master's Guide, AD&D First Edition by Gary Gygax, which is recommended books to read to get you the flavor and vibe of what D&D is all about. DCC was very streamlined rules. It feels like basic or advanced Dungeons and Dragons. It feels like basic D&D, but they snuck in some modern game mechanics. Old School Essentials did the same thing, by the way. It's easy to customize for your home game, adding new classes, spells, and a disfavor table. That's the custom table that I was mentioning earlier. Lots of expansions, hacks, fanzines, Mar, Dying Earth, Dark Tower, Caverns of Theresa. It's interesting. I do know that they do write excellent adventure modules. And I know that they have a whole line of classic adventure modules for sale over the years. I think they're a twist on the original module, like Keep on the Borderlands, but they called theirs different, and they presented it in a different way and to make it more interesting, I suppose. I never bought any of those modules, but I did read about them, and it does sound very interesting. It does, the modules, and I probably should check them out. But I do so much of my own work that it's hard for me to purchase modules that I'm not running at that time. But if I ever do come across one, I'll definitely get it. So the original Greyhawk was born in OD&D, original D&D, AD&D, advanced D&D, and some source material. It's got the same source material and the same gritty feel. So this Dungeon Master is using the gold box set as his baseline in his Greyhawk game. And then he goes over the different rules. So let's go ahead and look at the thing here. So it looks like the table of contents starts off with characters. You got the cleric, thief, warrior, wizard, dwarf, elf, halfling. So the dwarf, elf, and halfling is a class as race idea from basic D&D. So that's interesting. So that way people that came from old edition that didn't like AD&D would prefer this. It makes it easier. For the standard classes that players come across, it makes it a lot easier for the DM to spin them up real quick. Chapter 2 is the skills. Chapter 3 is equipment. And 4 would be combat. And then 5 is the magic. And magic spells is the next tables after that. 247 pages is the last chapter. Chapter 6 is quests and journeys. So it looks like they added a bunch of plot hooks here for quests you can go on for a new dungeon master that needs help running the game in this flavor of the rules. 7 judges rules. Then next is chapter 7, the judges rules. This is the dungeon master rules. So this is just one book. It's the player's handbook and the dungeon master guide all in one book. In fact, this is it right here. It's massive. It's huge. The last page is like page 512. So everything you want in one book. You can take that. It's a big book too. It's not small, and the print size is pretty normal, so it's easy to read. And it's a nice quality book. So the next chapter would be magic items. So sure enough, chapter 6, 7, and 8 is for dungeon masters only, obviously. And then they have a bunch of appendixes. Well, down below they list all the cleric spells, monsters. So there's your monster manual, all in one book. And then adventures. So they give you 2 example adventures. They keep off the Borderlands. They put in here as an example. That's one of the modules I was talking about before. So right off the bat, they state, abandon all presumptions, ye who enter here. Turn the pages of this tome until should you meet these qualifications. So this front page sets the vibe of what kind of rule system this is. It reads to me, not only does it list the different dice that they use to make it interesting, I suppose, but it does set a tone of what kind of game you're expected to run here. And basically, I think it's a good read. And then also the tone is reminiscent of Gary Gygax, where he threatens and warns you, if you don't meet these conditions, replace this book upon yourself and flee with great celerity, for a bane befalls the heretical beholder of what lies herein. That's how Gary Gygax used to write in his first Dungeon Master's Guide, threatening the reader. I thought was great. The core mechanics, which is basically D20, yes. A natural roll of a 1 is always a miss. Natural roll of 20 is automatic hit. So the first chapter, chapter 1, is probably the most interesting chapter for us when it comes to analyzing the system for running a Greyhawk campaign like the Temple of Elemental Evil. And sure enough, they start off with some great verse poetry. You're no hero. You're an adventurer. You're a reaver, a cut purse, a heathen slayer, a tight-lipped warlock guarding long-dead secrets. You seek gold and glory, winning it with sword and spell, caked in the blood and filth of the weak, the dark, the demons, and the vanquished. There are treasures to be won deep underneath, and you shall have them. So right away, the vibe of this presentation is more about dungeon crawling, about going into dungeons and exploring them and looting them and finding interesting traps and treasures and encounters and monsters and situations. And a lot of us love that kind of Dungeons and Dragons, and I do too. That's one of the reasons why I like playing old school essentials as well. Same kind of idea, where you go into dungeons and you find all these interesting things. That's how we used to play in the early days before we started running modules. Because all us dungeon masters would just, that week, a dungeon master would create a module, a dungeon, and we would run through it. And then the next week, another dungeon master would say, hey, I just created a new dungeon. I got some cool rooms and traps and monsters in there. I can't wait for you guys to go through it. And so we looked forward to going through the B1 module, the depths of the unknown, and having fun exploring. That's what it was all about, like exploring. And then right away, it starts off with an outline of how to do custom creation. It states that you start off at level 0, and there's a short list on character creation, where 1 is roll your abilities, 2 is determine your 0 level occupation, 3 is choose an alignment, 4 is purchase equipment, 5 is attempt to survive your first dungeon, and 6 is based on the class chosen, you may have some spells. So this is a thing right away that doesn't really mess well with running an actual epic sandbox campaign for the Temple of Elemental Evil. Now, we usually, when you run a traditional epic campaign, like in Greyhawk, players usually create their characters not randomly, but they come up with ideas of what kind of character they want to play that would be a good fit for the party and for the campaign with the Dungeon Master's help. Obviously, the players don't know all the lore of Greyhawk or what's really going on with the module too, but that's the Dungeon Master's job to help guide the players into creating their characters for running this campaign. We're talking about something different here. We're talking about running an epic sandbox campaign, not just a one night of fun. We're not talking about a weekend at a convention, a tournament. No, we're talking about something different. We're talking about running a campaign, not just some random create a character until you die type situation. Because one of the reasons it's an epic campaign. The Dungeon Master spent months preparing that campaign, setting it up for planning it, getting the right group together, and planning the characters out and planning the arc and what's going to happen. Because you all know the story of the Temple of Elemental Evil. This is not just something that some guy in a basement made up that he wants his players to go through his story. No, this is the Temple of Elemental Evil. You all know what happens. You could have it start at the slavers and the A modules, go to the moat house, go to the temple, go through the G's, the giants, G1, G2, G3, go through the D's to the drow, and finally the Q1 to see Loth herself. Big epic showdown at 13th level? It's the fight of God. So this is a traditional epic campaign from Greyhawk. This is something kind of set. It's by Gary Gygax. It's Gary Gygax's default campaign for Greyhawk that everybody's run for decades. It's not something that we probably want to mess around with and screw it up and start over. And so you want to put a little bit more care into running this campaign. If you don't think you have the right group of right players or the right DM that can really devote that kind of time, that's what my website's for, to help you guys run this campaign. As you know, there's over 2,000 articles and artwork of maps and tavern menus and non-player characters and dialogue and flavor text and NPCs and shops and cities and villages and organizations and politics. There's a lot. It's Temple of Elemental Evil meets Game of Thrones. And I did all that work. I spent 7 years working on this campaign to run my group through, which I do. But I did it more for this project so everybody can use this lore. It's not my personal campaign. It's all based on canon from the World of Greyhawk box set, all the lore books that came out since then, integrated with Living Greyhawk lore from the 2000s to 2008, because Living Greyhawk expanded the world, created all those smaller villages and those other organizations like the Gnarly Rangers and the Druids of the Gnarly, things like that Gary Gygax expected you to do when you're running the Temple of Elemental Evil. The Temple of Elemental Evil is not just a module like running the S1 Tomb of Horrors or the S2, like you run an adventure and you have fun until it's done. No, the Temple of Elemental Evil is a campaign that engages you throughout the area, not only the village of Hommlet and Nulb, which is 2 villages and a certain 20-mile radius, but also the other villages in the area and the Gnarly Forest and the Cron Hills, Selene to the south, Furandi to the north, Valuna to the west, the city of Verbobonc, all those lords, all those people, organizations, all that is part of this campaign. It's like layers of the onion. You peel back each layer of the onion, you start off with banditries on the rise, and you find out they're a little bit more organized than they should be. There's something's going on. And you finally track them down to the organization down at Nulb. And they're working and collaborating with other organizations out there, like in the Gnarly Forest or the Wild Coast with the slavers. Get what I'm saying here? There's a lot going on where your players can get engaged and track down and pursue this investigation or what's going on. The first rising was put down by the forces of good because they were dumb enough to put together an army and march upon the city of Verbobonc. And of course, all the forces of good from all the countries in the area got together and put them down and drove them back through Nulb, destroyed half of Nulb, and then laid waste to the temple, so it's just ruins, and sealed it with great glyphs and wards of magic, basically to seal in Zuggtmoy. So it was 7 years later, said, I want to do this again, but I'm going to do it smart. I'm going to send the Mouth of Iwas down there, Hedrick, the supreme commander of the Temple of Elemental Evil. I'm going to send him down there and start a second rising. And we're going to do it smart this time. We're going to use bandits and brigands and pirates. And we're going to make sure that Nulb is a hive of scum and villainy. It's a local problem. It's nothing like the Circle of Eight would have to be involved with. But there are agents there trying to figure out what's going on. But we need the players to do all that. So basically, what I'm saying is you're putting a lot of effort and time into this kind of most epic campaign ever in the history of Dungeons and Dragons. You don't want to just throw it away with random character creation, random backgrounds and occupations and stuff. So this page, the very first page of creating a character, I don't see page numbers on here. I probably have to scroll to the left. I always thought this part was optional. Because I remember when I originally looked at this game years ago, I thought it was optional, a way to start playing this rule system. I would not want to run the Temple of Elemental Evil campaign this randomly. I mean, I guess you could, but the Dungeon Master is going to have to do a lot of backpedaling to get it to work, to have the players fall into place. Traditionally, that's how we used to run D&D all these years anyway. Players would create their characters based on a certain idea. The Dungeon Master would help out with that. Tell them, wow, there's no drow in this area, but there's plenty of half-elves and wood elves and sylvan elves and dwarves and hobbits and halflings, sorry. Okay, so they have this thing called a character creation funnel. I thought this is just a gimmick of something that a lot of people like to do. This kind of gimmick is good for conventions. A funnel to see if you survive, to see what kind of character you turn out to be, or just for fun at home. You can have fun doing this too, playing this game at home, but you're not playing the Temple of Elemental Evil. I mean, you could, but the Dungeon Master would have to shoehorn in a lot of stuff to get it to work as the players funnel their 4 characters into one. I mean, you're not starting off on the road to the Hommlet and checking in at the end of the Welcome Wentz with 4 characters. That's what I'm saying. It's just a different kind of campaign from this kind of game so far. But who's to say the Dungeon Master running the Temple of Elemental Evil campaign, he didn't do this, I don't think. If he did, he probably ran like a sub-dungeon beforehand, a pre-dungeon beforehand, before putting them into the world of Greyhawk. I think maybe that's what he did. I'll have to ask him. He can answer in the notes below, in the comments below. Okay, so you got funnel, 0 level. I remember doing this a few times over the years. And you get 4 characters each. And you get the funky dice, and they all have their own uses. Instead of rolling 1 die for a result, what many traditional RPGs did, which is -4 or +4, and all the other games that I run do it this way. In fact, I have a whole article. I have another video on this, actually. All the bonuses and pluses of all the game systems, all in one video, comparing. And I have a chart for that, too, to compare all the game systems. I don't think I put DCC in that review, though. So DCC uses these modifiers. They do. But it also employs a system of swapping out dice types. So we're not going to talk about, again, I don't want to get into the mechanics. That's okay. It doesn't matter what mechanics you're using when you're role-playing. It's just how the Dungeon Master is running the game, right? It's not going to affect the storyline, the plot, the campaign, how you do it. It's just a matter of how much your characters are role-playing. I prefer at my table that my players role-play. And if they don't describe their actions, they don't do anything. And I have another rule. You can't move your miniature unless you describe your action first. Then you can move your miniature after the fact. I like miniatures. I like printing them up. I like painting them. I like looking at them. But I do not move them around like a board game. So when the player's turn to do something, you can't just reach over and just move his miniature over on the battle map. No, you have to describe what you're doing and role play. Maybe even some dialogue, hopefully. Even just a couple of words is enough. I'm not expecting people to be actors, but they should try something to be in character somewhat. All I care about is the effort. I don't really care about how good they are at it. All right, so you always roll 3 dice 6. So we go on and on about rolling up your stats, which is basically the same, pretty close here. They have a table. They have a guidance counselor. The modifier is the same as old school essentials, -3 to +3. And I know 5th edition's -5 to +5. And they got wizard spells, bonuses to wizard spells too. So yeah, that's all basically the same stuff. And then they have a luck table. So this is different. Basically, depending on when you're born, you got certain bonuses. That's fine. That will fit into any campaign too. You might want to customize this for the world of Greyhawk if you wanted to. It'd be some work. This is something like I would do for my Patreon members if I was inclined to do that. This is the example of kind of work I do. And artwork. The savings throws are all the same. The languages. So here they're Pacific. So languages is campaign Pacific, campaign world Pacific. It's not. So in their rule system, they have a Pacific common tongue, and they all have the generic dwarf, elf, and halfling races. But basically all the additional languages, all of these other sub races too. This is all generic stuff. Greyhawk would supersede anything written here if you're running it in Greyhawk. But that's fine. You know, that's expected. And I'm not putting it down. At 0 level, this is what you start off at 0 level. Okay. You know, no matter how you create your character, you could start off as easy generation of equipment, or you could actually have them roll up gold and have them buy their equipment. But it's faster to have pre-generated equipment for sure if you're trying to get going here, especially with new players. I like going through equipment with new players because it helps them learn the game. There's some good examples. You might want to get a hammer. You might want to get a candle. I just described briefly some of the mechanics of the equipment to help them role play, to help them feel engaged, so they can actually do something in the world beyond roll to hit or cast a spell. And that creates a lot of immersion in this game, makes it bring it to life. So they have a whole section on occupation, and all systems, Old School Essentials, Castles and Crusades, they all have an occupation system or a secondary skill or a background chart. If your player imagines this background he wants to be, and he goes, I want to be a blacksmith's son. Yeah, you could, as a dungeon master, allow him to do it because that's what he wanted. Or you could be random and just have them roll on the table. I won't get into mechanics of the other systems of background skills, but this is what they're doing here. And so then you have the occupation table, which is quite big, actually. It's probably the largest I've seen. The occupation is the left-hand column, and then you get a trained weapon to go with it, and whatever trade goods you get to go with it with your character. So it looks like you get this item. As a halfling wanderer, you get a sling and you get a hex doll. I can see why this would be convenient, speeding up creating characters at like a convention or just at home when you're in a hurry. Continued all the way to 100. So it's a big chart with some subcategories. This is fine. Weapon training basically explains how to go from 0 level to 1st level, trading goods, your alignments. Now, alignments are generic here for this rule system. I'm sure Dungeon Crawl Classics has their own campaign world. I'm sure this rule book is written for that campaign world. Well, the campaign world you're running will supersede anything written here. So we're talking about playing in the world of Greyhawk. So you're going to have to look at the World of Greyhawk box set or other source, like my website. Let's scroll past that. Nice artwork again. I like this Call of Cthulhu type vibe of the different kind of characters. Hyperborea does that with their rule system, which is based on AD&D. Level advancement, that's more mechanics, experience points, tables, and things like that. Nothing world-changing for running a campaign. Choosing your class. So after you finally get to class level, 1st level, you get to choose your class. When you're playing traditional Dungeons and Dragons campaign, like in Greyhawk, you always create a character and you chose your class. Well, they're just doing this after the fact. And they got mechanics for that too, to help you based on how you played your 0 level character. But it really has nothing to do with running D&D and Greyhawk. So this explains their cleric. The only thing that's important about this part of the chapter is his mechanics for running the rule system. Everything from the World of Greyhawk supersedes everything written here for what a cleric is and what he can do. It's just the mechanics that you're running for your rule system is the only thing that's going to be changed. So they got everything covered here for running a system in their world that have chaos lords and things like that. So that's cool. And they go more into the mechanics and sacrifices. So they added stuff that the World of Greyhawk clerics can't do, like sacrifice. Well, they do. An evil cleric, a dungeon master can create an NPC evil cleric, and he can judge these sacrifices made by the cleric for the adventure. Yes, you can do anything you want, actually, with any rule system, because modules do that. If somebody's going to write whatever module you look at, if you look at the module and look through the whole thing, you'll see custom rules in that module. Even the A modules have custom rules. Some of those rules didn't appear in the book form. They appeared in these modules first before appearing in the book form. That's where the rules came from. They also came from Dragon Magazine. But yeah, so basically there are some things like lay on hands. That's something a cleric would not do, only a paladin would do in the world of Greyhawk. So that's something that you have to figure out in your campaign world. But all the gods are specific in the world of Greyhawk, and they all have their own specialty clerics and their own spheres of influence. So some of the stuff you would have to ignore if you're going to run a Greyhawk campaign. This stuff I'm talking about is only important if you're running a full epic long campaign that's dedicated for years of play in this campaign world. If you're just running like a short little module like the Village of Hommlet and going to Mo House and clearing it out, and that's all you're doing, it's a short little campaign like that, then I guess none of that stuff really matters. But if you're running this epic campaign, like I explained before, starting off at first level and finally getting to like 13th or 15th level and facing down Loth herself and Uis, you can't. The NPCs and the bad guys have to be balanced. And they are in the world of Greyhawk. But they would have to be recreated for this rule set if you were to use some of these rules to change Greyhawk. Something I would not want to tackle. It'd be too difficult. It'd seriously unbalance and unhinge the campaign. Sure, that could be another project that somebody could do like myself, but I have no intentions of doing that. Cleric, yep. So they get their spells at first level and their titles and stuff. So that's okay. It's all basic stuff. Because you remember, Hadrek is just 9th level cleric. Hadrek, the Supreme Commander of the Temple of Elemental Evil, he's a 9th level cleric. So you have to recreate his stat block. And also a little bit how he behaves, how he tracks the characters, how he reacts, the forces at his command, the things that he can do is all shaped by the rule set as well. It's also the spells that is available and the magic items, because AD&D has a lot, and you can really shape a character with spells and magic items immensely. And like Old School Essentials has very little, so it's very limited. So I can imagine Hedrick, the Supreme Commander of the Temple of Elemental Evil, in Old School Essentials Basic. That'd be horrible. Old School Essentials is not really meant to be an epic campaign rule system. It's not. It's a more limited scope type of rule system. It's not robust enough. And whenever you see articles online or descriptions anywhere, they always talk about how robust a rule system is. For example, this campaign, the Temple of Elemental Evil and the G's and the D's and the A's and the Q's, and you're going from first level to 15th level, you need a robust system, because it's not just running a dungeon with canned monsters in the dungeon rooms, or you write up a special rule for this monster in this one dungeon, this cool trap or something. It's more than that. It's the whole campaign world, hundreds of NPCs and bad guys and monsters. You have to have a concrete, full, robust system to deal with that. I've seen it firsthand. I tried to run I tried to run Old School Essentials in the Greyhawk campaign, and after the second level, I knew it wouldn't work. I said, sorry guys, we just can't run this system. We're going to have to switch back to Castles of Crusades if we want to continue. As I saw the problems after second level, I saw what was happening in combat and the interactions between the monsters, the players, the NPCs. It was a problem, because that game is also very specific on your actions from melee round to melee round. It kind of gamified it a little bit, the way they handle initiative and turn rounds and combat. It wasn't as free flowing as Castles of Crusades. It wasn't able to handle complex situations like that. It turned it more into more of a board game or gamey type rule systems, where the roll of the die affected the outcome, not your role playing. So I see that this system might be a little bit like that too. Cleric titles, gods. So these are the gods, obviously, from their own world. So you'll have to ignore this entire chapter if we're running it in Greyhawk. So I guess there's a class that relies on a Patron like a warlock. So that's something else to consider. We'll get to that in a minute. The thief looks pretty standard. So I don't see anything different about a thief that had to be changed at all. I think you pretty much run it the way it's written here. He does have luck, which is fine. You know, it doesn't matter. It won't affect the campaign. It's just another mechanic added to the campaign. Any charts added to the campaign will affect the campaign. It's just a flavor of how the Dungeon Master runs this game and what the players like to. So the thief has a lot of hit points. Look at the website. The Verbobonc campaign guide on World Anvil. There's 2,000 articles there. 13 villages, 1 city, several dungeons. They're all keyed for 5th edition because I had to. But originally I keyed them for AD&D and Castles from Crusades over 7 years ago. But anyway, yeah, you have to convert everything over. And that's obvious right there. A thief with die 10 hit points. That's crazy hit points. There's a lot of people that don't like a lot of hit points in their game. It turns it into more of a gamey type game. The combat lasts forever. So we keep going down to the thief skills. Looks fine. It's all standard stuff. They got poison too. That's cool. Oh, yeah, lawful, chaotic, and neutral thieves. And they have different abilities, different bonuses depending on what kind of thief you are, which is fine. A man among men, a thief among thieves. So it's good lore here for being a thief, like a beggar king. Okay, I see. These are like subclasses. The Warren, the 12 Spider Assassins, the Beggar King. Oh, I see. I think these are maybe type of thieves in the campaign that they have. That's cool. And then the Warrior. I bet this is pretty straight up. Die 12 hit points. Traditionally, the Barbarian had that many hit points in AD&D. But anyway, the Warrior has die 12, and everything looks pretty standard. You can do a mighty deed of arms, which is okay. Critical hits and all that. And you got a critical hit table, I'm sure, that makes it fun. But there's nothing that has to be changed except, of course, you have to convert all the NPCs in the game over. And monsters, I suppose, too. The Warrior, all these mechanics to play in a Warrior. That's fine. And then you have militant orders. And these are different factional organizations, obviously, in their campaign. I can see that right now. The Order of the Saint Stephen. Order of the Dragon. So, obviously, you wouldn't use any of that because we're playing in the world of Greyhawk. And they have all their own orders. Wizards are pretty standard at first, but then they added something that's different. Supernatural patrons. So this kind of changes things right here. This will make running the campaign very difficult. The Dungeon Master had to put a lot of work in the campaign to change it to account for this. Because traditional Greyhawk doesn't have that. There's always one NPC character in one module that did this, which is a unique situation, but not widespread as this would say, because this is the wizard class and all of them have access to this. So that changes the entire campaign. This is a huge change. Honestly, it would take too much to change. Even the Circle of 8 would be affected by this. The ramifications, the fallout of this kind of power throughout the entire world would make a lot of things different. It had to be reconsidered. The powers that be, the factions, what Uis is up to and all his people, the Temple of Elemental Evil, the whole entire organization would have to be reconsidered, their tactics and strategies and stuff. That'd be tough. And so here's some typical patrons that they have. The Wizard. Wizards have die 6 hit points. Yeah. So cool artwork. I like it. So the Dwarf is obviously racist class. He's probably just a warrior. What kind of special stuff he has? Warrior, no thief stuff, underground skills. It looks like a typical warrior to me. With die 10 hit points. He's got luck. So they gave him luck. Action dice. Another mechanic. And there's the dwarves for you. So, there's dwarves in Greyhawk, and it'd be easy just to use this dwarf. Except Greyhawk is a lot more robust. I mean, dwarves and halflings and gnomes, half-elves and sylvan elves and gnomes, they all have different classes too. They're not just a gnome, not just a dwarf. You got dwarf fighters, skirmishers, dwarf scouts. You got dwarf shaman, dwarf clerics. So because they all have their own gods. Like the dwarves have 5 gods they worship, and they all have their shrines in their villages. Just something to think about. So the elf, same thing. Elves are huge in Greyhawk. They're there's dozens of articles on my website, and ever since the beginning, the World of Greyhawk box set, there's a lot of elves, a lot of different kind of elves, and classes for the elves, and a lot of different organizations. Like the Knights of the Moon. So, yeah, this is too limited. This is kind of like Old School Essentials. It has the same problem. It limits their races and classes to only Pacific, not enough to encompass Greyhawk. But you have to do a lot of work to run Greyhawk. I don't know how that DM's doing it. Let's see what he's saying in his thing. He said, funky dice, 3 dice 6. Yeah, this is all standard stuff. Luck, everyone at 0 level. Alignment, yeah, just like BX. Level 10's maxed out. So much for the circle of 8. And here's the classes. Yeah, very limited scope. In fact, Old School Essentials Advanced has more classes than this. 2-page skill system. So that's kind of makes it easy, I'm sure. Equipment's the same. All right, so let's keep going back. Halflings, another racist class. So traditionally used to be like a fighter thief. Yeah, 2-handed weapons, and I can see slings, staff sling. They also have thieving abilities and charm. Traditionally, a halfling was like a fighter thief combination. Old School Essentials does the same thing. Yeah, so that's cool. They get die 8 hit points, which is a lot for a halfling. Then we got cool artwork. I like it. I like it a lot. Skills. So outside the skills required for combat, thievery, and magic, your character knows the skills dictated by the occupation they had before choosing a life as an adventurer. Skills by occupation, difficulty levels. So they have DC 5, DC 10, DC 15, DC 20. This is like 5th edition D&D. Well, actually, that started with 3rd edition. I'm sorry. I should be correcting what I'm saying. Starting with 3rd edition, this is how they did challenge checks. Dice challenge, skill checks. Yeah, all the rule systems do it differently, but they all have the same effect, basically. In fact, very few people know, but even Old School Essentials has one. You just got to read carefully the rules. You have to look into it. Remember it? I don't remember at the top of my head right now. It's got something to do with something. I can't remember what it is. It might be the D6 thing. Okay, when not to make a skill check. So Castles of Crusade says, you never make a skill check unless the results will be negative result, game-changing effect, take a serious loss or something. I can't remember what they said. Oh well, I made other videos about it. It's hard to remember everything, but I'm sure they said the same thing here. Checks are designed to use when a system abstract rules is necessary to adjudicate a situation. Only make skill checks when practical descriptions by the players will not suffice. So yeah, the players got to try. They got to describe what they're doing. They got to engage and interact. And then when it comes down, finally, after all that, you determine whether or not to say they do it or you make them have a roll. Only with a significant chance of loss versus success, that's when you make the roll. If it's not going to matter, if they're failure, it doesn't matter in the game, then don't even have them roll it. You're wasting time. One of the most important things about running a game, the D&D game, is pace and timing. If you're bad at pace and timing, your game's going to be boring. Players are going to fall asleep at the table. So more important than anything is pace and timing. In fact, I'll allow players to question a rule, and I'll consider it seriously. Because a lot of times I'll forget. I don't remember everything. And so they'll question it, and then I'll consider it, and I might even look it up real quick as long as it doesn't take more than 30 seconds. Then I'll make a decision. And if they don't like that decision, then they have to wait till the game's over and they can come talk to me later after everybody left, because we can't stop the game. That'd be bad. Pace and timing is really important. Same thing with combat. You want to make sure combat flows and doesn't take forever. So, for example, there's good examples here. This is all more mechanics that has really nothing to do with running a campaign in Greyhawk. That's fine. And nothing wrong with that. Starting gold. This is how I like to start my campaigns. I make my players roll dice to see how much gold they start with, and they can go ahead and buy all their initial equipment based on their background. I was born in a farm with some cows. I did a lot of cow tipping and riding. Okay, coinage. Same. Yep, that's all the same. They have electrum pieces in this game. Now, again, this is campaign specific. This is they've only put this here for their rule system, but in my campaign we don't have electrum pieces. But even though Greyhawk does, check penalties. Yeah, they got bulky armor penalties. I do the same thing. Depends on the rule system you're using. That's good. Encumbrance, I love it. Hopefully they have an easy encumbrance system that's quick. Fumble. It doesn't have to be exactly. It doesn't have to apply to physics exactly to make it ultimately realistic. Encumbrance does not have to do that. A nod to realism is enough. That's how I look at it. So heavy armor is clumsy and awkward. Fumble dice. Weapons, get past all that. Ammunition. So all this stuff is very limited. All the rule systems I have third-party equipment lists that I use. So other dungeon masters put together. So that way you can have more of a choice, more options. Here's your equipment. It's like this base equipment is probably missing a whole bunch of stuff that players usually want. But all the basics are here. All the mounts here. This is all unimportant stuff that for our use case here for running Greyhawk. Well, that looks good though. Timekeeping, rounds. Each round's 10 seconds. That's standard. 30 feet, 20 feet. Marching order, initiative. That's all basic stuff. Typical of a D&D game. And then we have the actions each round. So you can move and do something. Cool. It describes how that's done. Here's a chart for that, for your actions, which is similar to all the other games. Types of combat, your armor classes, the attack roll. It's a chart. It's basically pointing towards this chart down here. This looks pretty standard. Fumbles, traditionally, just a simple roll one is always a miss, but obviously this game system takes it a bit farther, makes it more interesting in their view, which is cool. Attack. I role play that stuff on this situation, depending what they were doing. That the fumble takes that form. That's how I've been DMing for 40 years, so I'm pretty good at that. A lot of experience to making a fumble, turn it into role-playing terms. Designed, tailored to that situation. And the players love it. Sometimes I'll roll like, okay, either you drop the weapon or you fall flat. Then I'll make them do a dex check. Okay, warriors, dwarves, heavy armor, moderate armor. Cool. Fumbles. So here's the fumble chart. So this is the first chart so far I've seen in this game system that makes it unique. Their own personalized fumble chart. And a lot of game systems have this. This is their custom tailored one. Critical hits the same way. That's fine. It looks all normal stuff. A little bit different, I'm sure. Here's a critical table. So this critical table takes it a step further, then make it interesting. See, the things that happen in these tables, I just role play them based on my 40 years experience. But this makes it go faster. And it also adds a little bit of mechanics to it. Especially for a dungeon master that has been playing for a long time. He doesn't have the experience of coming up with this stuff at the last minute like that. Magic weapons never break, things like that. All thieves and elves, another crit table. So it's definitely customized of a lot of things that could happen in a round. I'm sure some of these things I probably never thought of. Or some of it might be redundant, but it doesn't matter. It still doesn't affect how you would run this with Greyhawk, so it looks fine. So there's a lot of crit tables here. A lot of crit tables. So that pace and timing thing I was talking about? I'm sure you're going to know what I think about that. I do not like tables. In fact, that's the strength of Castles and Crusades. I hardly ever have to look at the Dungeon Master Shield running that game. It's eloquently designed. Very, very robust. It's basically the modern version of AD&D by Gygax. Mounted combat. So, yeah, same stuff. +1 AC. Mighty Deeds of Arms. Cool. You can do some cool stuff. The different deeds. They remind me of normal activities during combat. So, Castle and Crusades does have these actions that you can do as a choice, as a player choice in combat. This is available in a lot of different systems. I know Old School Essentials Basic doesn't. I think Old School Advanced does. I know their Dolmenwood does. Trips and throws. You can even do a lot of this stuff in AD&D too, the first edition. Maneuvers and things like that. So these are just all mechanics. That's not campaign affecting. They're just mechanics for combat. Death, bleeding out, fine. Recovering the body, that's great. Healing and morale. Good. Morale is really important, especially when you're fighting the agents of the Temple of Elemental Evil, like the bandits, brigands, and pirates, and the humanoids, because they all know stuff in the campaign. So if the players can question them, they can learn things about the campaign. That's really important. Overwhelming odds in that campaign. Any group will get destroyed, absolutely destroyed, devastated, if they try to take it head on. So even Gygax said that in the module. He said, you really need to play the factions against each other to really do well. And I expanded that 100 times. So Nulb originally had 4 locations. Now it has 30 locations with some major heavy hitters there. Brigands, pirates, and bandits, and other leaders. And temple agents. Yeah, if the players go there, start causing trouble, and they get there too early, too low level, yeah, they're in trouble. The campaign is going to end very quickly. But anyway, the morale check is really important there. Savings throws, great. Sounds good. You can burn your luck up. It's another mechanic. Withdrawing 2 weapons. Combat rules. Turning unholy. This is something you could do in any campaign if you role play with it, but they got a mechanic for it, so it makes it easier for the dungeon master. Unholy results by hit dice. Cool. Instead of turn undead, you can command undead, I'm sure, or destroy undead. Creature indicated T, turned, and automatically killed. K. Holy Smite. So it's got some cool extra effects there to make the game more fun. Spell duels are really never accounted for in any system usually. There's not a lot of good rules for spell duels in any game system I ever played. They're kind of vague and say, yeah, you can do it, and here's some vague guidelines on how to do it. But it wasn't really complete. And it looks like they put a lot of effort. They did a good job outlining the mechanics of how to do that here. It looks pretty in-depth and to the point and succinct. It looks like a well-done set of rules for spell dueling. So yeah, this would be a great benefit to any campaigns because you're fighting. There's a lot of casters in the Greyhawk campaign, and this could happen. So that's great. I like it. There's 2 pages of it. Yeah, look at that. 2 pages of these rules on how to do spell dueling, and then there's a chart to go with it. So this would be useful, because this will happen a lot in the campaign. Seriously, I think just wizards. You got more counter spell power. So that makes it more interesting, the results of the spell duel. It's pretty cool. I like it. It looks, well, I guess if you're used to running it, it'll probably go pretty quick. Because I'm not familiar with it. It looks like a lot of rules. But maybe, they had to explain it with the chart and stuff. But once you start using it, it's probably pretty intuitive, I'm sure. There's another cool extra thing about pocket dimensions, alignment rifts, and time slows. So this is all supernatural stuff. Demonic invasion. Oh, these are results of the spell duel. Interesting. So this section is basically with great artwork and different kinds of magic. So the only thing that's different is the wizard classes. They embrace the black magic as well, which is fine. Now, the Temple of Elemental Evil, they embrace elemental magic, which really get their powers from Zuggtmoy. Now, of course, there's a priest of Uis. So, that's all, I guess you would call that black magic, I think. And I think here they basically have different ways of doing spell checks for that. There's white magic and black magic. They got the same thing, criticals and fumbles and concentration, spell checks by other classes, reversing your spells. It's cool. Light spell, dark spell, spellburn. So I guess you can use a spellburn mechanic to do even more with your spell casting. So it looks like they created a mini game for spell casting, adding more interesting things that can happen in spell casting, interesting results. They added more mechanics to make it more interesting. I don't know if this will slow the game down, because the most important thing about running a game is pace and timing. And if this slows the game down, I'd probably throw it out. But like I said before, I'm not familiar with it, and maybe this will be intuitive and you can run it and it won't slow the game down much once you get used to it. I don't think this will affect the actual campaign much, except when the players start fighting the agents of the Temple of Elemental Evil. This stuff will be happening as they're fighting them. It's still a matter of engagement and who wins and who doesn't win, just different results of that with these charts here. It makes it more interesting, I suppose. So yeah, this chart's interesting. What can happen? The wizard must sacrifice one of his most favored possessions. Okay. Regaining spells. So this is how you get your spells back. Spell casting is draining. Mercurial magic. So that's interesting. And they have a chart for that too. So there's a lot of different kind of magic here. So it's not definitely, I don't think this is a Vancium system. We haven't seen the spells yet. But it looks like they have a different way of doing spells here. It kind of reminds me of the magic system in Hyperborea too. They do the same thing. It's definitely much different. Somebody decided to change magic. They didn't like the Vancium system and went with it. This might change the campaign a little bit. Corruption. So basically, you have a problem of losing your soul and exposure to demons and other planes and energy, elemental energies and toxic quantities. So this would have to be considered with the agents of the Temple of Elemental Evil, all the priests, the elemental magics they cast, and those elemental nodes. A lot of serious considerations are going to have to be done using this system in Greyhawk. It seems kind of insurmountable. It seems kind of overwhelming to me. A lot of effort would have to be put into this, converting the system from Greyhawk to this, and coming to grips of the results, the effect on the campaign. I'm not really so sure this will make a large difference or not. I know it will definitely make some difference for sure, but it might be too much. There's minor corruptions, and then you have major corruptions. So I guess this is when spell casting goes really bad. To me, this all looks like, if you're a warlock type stuff, where you got patron. Generic spell misfires. So if your spell does misfire, you got a chart for that too. I'm not a big fan of charts. I don't mind a few charts, but you got too many charts in the game. It slows the game down immensely, trying to find the chart and trying to use the chart. But anyway, disapproval. The clerics must atone for their sins. So if the cleric does something bad, they got a table for it. That's cool. I do the same thing, but I don't have a list of 12 things. I just role play it in the moment that curtailed to the situation. Disapproval again. So there's 20 choices. The Wizard Grimoire, that's the Wizard Spellbook, and Ritualized Magic. So here, there are no schools of magic, only masters willing to take apprentices. Well, maybe in their campaign world, but not so with the world of Greyhawk. There's lots of schools of magic in the world of Greyhawk. The biggest one in the area of the Temple of Elemental Evil campaign is the Silver Consortium in the city of Greyhawk. So, like I said before, a lot of this stuff they state in this rulebook is only for their own campaign world. So it'd be hard to run this campaign rule set with the World of Greyhawk campaign. That's an actual campaign, not just a one-off. Wizard spell books, cool. Okay, so that's all basic stuff. Then on the right is the ritual stuff. So I guess you can have a circle of mages and cast these big powerful spells, and you can have a sacrifice if you want. This would affect how the Temple of Elemental Evil or any of the bad guy and players, how they behave in the world. When they have to do this kind of activity, they're going to be doing this kind of activity as some of their actions of their day-to-day activities. They're trying to promote the Second Rising, the Temple of Elemental Evil, and they're collaborating and organizing and working with humanoids, bandits, and pirates, and other NPCs, and other leaders, and nobles, and divers, and City of Verbobonc. And so all this, what they can do here directly affects that, what they're capable of doing. Has to be seriously taken into consideration. And I think that will change how they behave. Now, the known spells of the current era, so they're talking about their own personal campaign, but it looks like they have 760 wizard spells here, and they break them down into a chart. So a lot of these spells are very familiar from AD&D, and I'm sure they're described and a little bit differently with different actions, with a little bit of modified mechanics for this game system. So when I look at an NPC in the campaign world, I look at like Senshock, the High Wizard of the Temple of Elemental Evil. He's 12th level. And so I look at the spells at his disposal and what he can do. And I think how he can react to things that are happening in the campaign. You know, what spells are at his disposal? Can he summon a whole horde of demons and send them after the players that are hanging out at the village of Hommlet? Does he have a way of contacting some kind of supernatural being to get information, to spy on the players? So just to give you some examples. The clerics are the same way. You know, how much communication they have with not only their deity, but their deity's agents. You know, how much help can they get from their deity? Because you're talking about bad guys that you got to figure out how they're going to react to the players, depending on what the players do and where they're at. That has to be taken into consideration. This is not supposed to be a dungeon slog where you're going room to room, killing monsters and looting them, and then knock on the next door and do it again. No, this is not a dungeon crawl. This is a living, breathing campaign. You're not even in Nulb until you're at least 5th level. If you do, you probably get killed, captured, become a prisoner, sacrificed to one of the elemental nodes, or undead fodder. Pretty much become a slave. Maybe somebody can come rescue you. So yeah, you have to take that into consideration. So here's the patron spells. So they got their own spells. They look pretty powerful. Pretty cool. Wizard spells. The wizard spells look like this fancy in Magic. Well, let's try that. I don't want to lose my place. We'll keep going. Look at these charts. Cantrips. Charts. So it looks like every spell has a chart. Okay, charm person. 1 round, duration, range, level. Yeah. So these are good descriptions with the results of depending. I guess when you cast a spell, you have to roll on the table and see how well you did. See what kind of effect you have for that spell. So obviously, this takes up more than half the book. Because look how much room each spell takes on a page. That's a lot. No wonder they only went up to 5th level spells. They don't have room. That's funny. Yeah, I got to say, this is quite different in terms of layout compared to the industry standard of old school essentials. By far, they're the best layout rule set I've ever seen. And I try to use their example when I'm writing my modules. You should be able to fit at least 4 of these spells on a page. You just got to change things. I would definitely curtail a lot of that stuff. But I guess they feel that's the positive trait of this game. I guess it helps new dungeon masters play the game because they don't have to actually role play and come up with their own results. They just use the table. They let the tables run the game for them. That's what that looks like to me. Okay, so let's go ahead and get past all this. Okay, finally, Chapter 8, Magic Items. Brief look. Typical magic items. I'm sure they're all custom designed to go with this rule system. I'm sure they have their charts as well. And I don't know how big of a magic item list it is. I don't expect it to be too big, consider the scope and size of this manual. But you can make your own custom intelligent swords. And you got your scrolls. This is all standard stuff so far. Your potions. Yep. And your... Oh, that's it. Where's my Gauntlets of Ogre power? You can't have a campaign without Gauntlets of Ogre power. What are you guys thinking? I'm just kidding. I'm sure you guys must have another guide or a book of magic items and monsters, I'm sure. Like an expansion. Okay, monsters. So you can make your own monsters, monster names, descriptions, variety. So this is going to be a problem too. I bet you anything that there's not enough monsters in here to encompass the world of Greyhawk. Greyhawk has a lot of monsters. So you're going to have to take the world of Greyhawk monster and you're going to have to convert that stat block with a chart, I guess, to DCC. Oh, that'd be a lot of work. It's not simple. I can see that right now. Well, especially the magic part, the casting. You saw how elaborate that was, casting spells. That if it's a simple monster like an orc, that sounds pretty straightforward. That'd be simple. But some of these monsters are pretty elaborate. Okay, so this is making your own dead. This is talking about undead monsters. Don't play by the rules. Death, unique powers of different monsters, more charts. That's it. That's all the monsters. So there is no monster manual in this guide. I'm sure they sell a separate monster manual. I know they have different campaigns like Lankmire. I'm sure it has its own monster manual too. So I'm not trying to be ignorant on purpose. I know they have a lot of adventures, that's for sure. There's a lot of modules here. They got a lot of ads in the back of this book. But I'm pretty confident with their breadth of product. I'm sure they got everything. Okay, so critical hits by monsters. But I still think it's going to be tough to balance changing over to the new rule system with monsters and classes and races. Basically more than half the game. And gods and magic items. And okay, another critical hit table, just what we need. And more description of these critical hits. Castles and Crusades has these too in the optional CK guide, the Dungeon Master guide, which is 100% optional. You don't need it to run the game. But this is the kind of thing that's in the optional Dungeon Master guide, by the way. It's stuff like critical tables. If you're that kind of Dungeon Master that likes these sort of thing, I never use them because I like to role play. Treasure. So cool. I'm sure we're going to see more of this same. Okay. Pays $3.93 is treasure. Cool. There's all the treasure. Creatures, monstrous, and mundane. Monster manual. There's more. So a whole nother chapter just on the monster manual. Androids, giant ants, apes, go fast. So bugbears. Hey, bugbears are important for this campaign. So they didn't do what I thought they would do. There's no charts with every monster. So that's cool. Cave cricket, centaurs, giant centipede, chimera, cockatrice, cyclops, deep ones, demons, whole section on demons. This is cool. I'm really into bad guys having demons. I think that's cool. It scares the heck out of the players. I love it. I think it's great. I add a lot of this into my campaign. So this looks very useful to me. Type 1. So they use the types like old D&D, first edition monster manual. They didn't name them, obviously, but there's the types. Cool. Then they got named demons here. Oh. I guess they named them here. So they did name them, just not in that chart. Okay. It looks like they gave them their own names. So they customized the games for their campaign. This is a customized demon name for their campaign world. Interesting. Hello. Unique demons. So I guess you can create your own demon, custom demons with their chart. Random demon chart, which is cool. And an optional extra here, dimensional sailors. Dragons. A big article on dragons, which is useful too. This looks similar to D&D stuff. Dragon unique powers. I think it's similar to the second edition AD&D stuff where they expanded it. More. Yeah, there's a big section. and elementals too. Elementals are very important in this campaign, so it's good that they have a large detailed section on elementals to run it in the campaign. Interesting. So a lot of the basic monsters are here from AD&D, which is fine. Gnolls, a lot of gnolls in D&D and Greyhawk too, and goblins, of course, and hobgoblins. I like it. I like this so far. So it looks like they got initiative +5, +6 to hit, and +4 to damage, and hit dice. They do the +6 thing. Yeah. In modern gaming, like modern rules, like Castles and Crusades and Old School Essentials and stuff and Dolmenwood, they got rid of that thing because it was nonsensical. Let's see, where is it? Say 2-8 is fine, but you don't need 2-8 +2. Just doesn't make sense. Usually what they'll do is they'll put a hit point value in parentheses next to it of the average of like what that monster typically has to help speed up your encounter creation. That way you know their hit points right away. I can run a combat out of those game systems just from the monster manual. I don't have to write it out or anything because even the hit points are there. So I don't have to do any kind of, except for treasure. The only thing I have to come up with is treasure. Ogres, 22 strength. They're strong, +6 to hit. Orcs and owlbears, cool. I like it. These are definitely the base monsters, everything we're going to need in the campaign. Anything that's missing will have to be taken from AD&D and converted over. There's your zombies and the wolves. And men and magics. So looks like this is serfs and peasants and journeymen and master craftsmen and men-at-arms and knights and dukes. So these are the NPCs, I guess. So they look like the standard NPCs of your campaign world. So if you go to Hommlet, the Moat House, or you go to Nulb, full of bandits, they got a standard bandit and then one of the bandit leaders all ready to go, which makes it convenient. Of course, in my Nulb module, the stat blocks are on the back of the module for all the NPCs. And then Berserker, but that's all going to be 5th edition. Berserker, fortune teller, friars, knights, cool, magician, peasant, sage, witch. So this comes in very handy. A quick, because you never know, you never know what players will randomly encounter in the real world, and it's good to have this stuff at the tip of your fingers so you can run it like a typical guard. Cool. All right, so after that is the appendixes. I don't know if there's anything here that we need to know about. Curses and languages and inspirational reading, Appendix N. I did a whole video on Appendix N for Dolmenwood already, a video on YouTube. This wraps up my review for Dungeon Crawl Classics for running it with the Temple of Elemental Evil campaign for the world of Greyhawk. Now, I learned quite a bit going through this rule system again to refresh me of what it entails to run this game system for a campaign. Before, when I ran it, it was for a tournament. So it was only a one use case, and I only looked at it from one angle for running that particular event. I didn't really care beyond that, and I didn't look at it that way. So this is my first chance to go through the rules one more time and consider it for running in a different campaign world for a big epic campaign, like a sandbox campaign. Compared to the other game systems that I usually run, I see the differences quite clearly. And I realize that if anybody were to run this for like a World of Greyhawk campaign, not just a one-off or a one dungeon, there'd be a considerable amount of work that would need to be done to convert it over. That's the kind of thing I usually do for my patrons, but I've done it for only the stuff that I was interested in the past. I like to provide that kind of value to the Greyhawk community. And I know a lot of Dungeon Masters, they really appreciate it, and they use this material for their campaigns. I have a weekly live stream for 3 Arcs that on Sunday nights at 7 p.m. where I review everything I worked on that week, because I know not everybody has time to follow my work every day. And because I'm on the Discord daily talking to all the other Dungeon Masters on there as we're working on this project, getting their viewpoints, getting their critiques, making changes and edits. taking requests, answering questions for their campaign, or answering questions about this project. And you're more than welcome to join the Three Orcs Discord channel so you can come along and join the conversation, collaborate, and help out too. Also, if you want to support the project, please come to my Three Orcs Patron. Now, Patreon is for free for most of my work out there, all my maps and my artwork and my articles, because it's fan content for Wizards of the Coast. But if you want any of the higher resolution versions of those maps, then you have to be a member for that.
Did you enjoy video? Consider tossing support on my Patreon. It's best way to support orcs. If you would like to see more content, subscribe and post comments below. It better not be bad.
I hope you like my loose review on Defender Crawl Classics for running it in consideration with the world of Greyhawk. Thank you for your time, and I hope your players enjoy your campaigns as much as mine have.